Hey there everyone, it's me again. I wanted to make a new video to discuss a sort of mechanic with this game. It's not exactly a mechanic in the same way that, uh, climbing was at a different speed for different vocations. I feel like calling it a mechanic, but it's really a facet of how the game handles calculations. So I guess you would call this a facet of the code rather than a mechanic. But it does have a mechanical application, I guess you could say, in the game itself. Um, those of you who know me, I guess personally, know that I have been working on a spreadsheet off and on for all of the game's equipment, even going so far as to uh, test and validate for the actual potency values on debilitations via weapons and so on. I've also been trying to ascertain differences between Standard Edition and Dark Arisen. So let's say the All Mace. It actually has a different strength uh, at Dragonforge than it does in Dark Arisen, depending on which version of the game you're playing in. Same for its magic. Some weapons also had changes to their equip weight as well, mostly just by a 1/100th of a kilogram, which is odd, but yeah, they did that apparently because they felt it was necessary. Um, or it was perhaps a bug in coding, and not necessarily a true bug, but more of a I guess I should say side effect on the type of code they use to handle values for things like weight and damage stats and values. And this facet of the code does extend well beyond the actual weight values for your equipment. That's just the first thing that I started noticing it with because I've been going through every weapon and armor piece one at a time. Um, the easiest one to really notice this with is going to be well, the first thing I noticed it with Dragon's Dogma, and technically also Dragon's Bane. Dragon's Dogma, for those of you who don't know, is the sword that you get for defeating the dragon when you're playing as a vocation while wielding a one-handed sword. Um, the You'll notice on the equip page here it says it weighs 1 kilogram. Um, right down here, kind of under the name if you aren't sure where to look. Um, if you go over to the inventory page, it will say something different. It says 2 kilograms. However, if I was to try and transfer this to my character, Rice, you will notice the readout says that it actually is changing my encumbrance by 1.99 kilograms, not 2. A lot of people might think this is a bug. I've asked a couple of people to check around on different console platforms, whatever they have available to them. Shuen on the wiki has checked, and he confirmed that he had 1.99. Gemma Lady, I think goes by a different name on the wiki, had actually gotten not 1.99, they got 2. And that is, both of those are actually correct. Neither of those are misreads. You'll actually have probably noticed both on the equip menu as well as the inventory menu, Devil's Bane and Dragon's Dogma have the same weight value. They actually have the same weight value at all upgrade values. So when they're both at base level upgrade, so I guess 0 stars, they both weigh exactly the same as each other at 0 stars. Same with 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, Dragon Forge, Silver, and Gold. They're mirrors of each other in terms of weight class. Um, so it's really a good example in terms of the test for demonstration purposes. Um, so just like with Dragon's Dogma, if I was to give my character the Devil's Bane, it goes up by 1.99. Well, now, if I was to say give her another one of these, it's actually going up by 2, not 1.99. Now, hold on a second. That might seem like a bug. It is definitely not a bug. Um, It's actually how the game is handling the calculation for weight. I guess to highlight this, the game itself is not calculating things, at least not all things, as simply as we might think. We know that generally damage readouts, or not readouts, but just damage inflicted, is generally 1-to-1. So let's say your enemy, the goblin, has a hypothetical physical defense of 5, and your character has a hypothetical physical attack of 10. Well, the 5 points of physical defense that the goblin has is going to reduce your possible 10 damage to 5. That's generally how the community seems to think it works, and as far as I'm aware of and can tell, it does work out that way. There are some other calculations involved with it, certainly, but for layman's terms, it is essentially a 1-to-1 damage formula. Or yeah, I guess that'd be damage formula. I'm not sure what word to better describe it. Damage infliction, probably. The formula is going to be way more complex. Now, I needed a little bit of help from a friend. I have had a single class in college for intro to game programming and game design. It has been nearly 15 years since I took that class, so I have forgotten nearly everything with it. I remember fundamentals, but I don't remember how to do code, and I don't remember what types of codes were used for certain things. So I had to contact a friend that has been doing code work all his life in terms of his career, from video games, web pages, and a bunch of other stuff. So he's very educated in this. I called him up for a little bit of help with understanding what might be going on, and he thought that it seems most likely the whoever was writing the code for not only this aspect of the game, but probably other aspects, were using a type of arithmetic known as Modulus Operation. I am absolutely going to destroy trying to explain how that works and what exactly it is, but to at least help, I will link a rather helpful webpage down in the description. It certainly helped jog my memory. Might not be necessarily as helpful for all of you, unless some of you are more math inclined or do have some experience in programming and code. A lot of arithmetic goes into code, so if you have any experience in arithmetic, you probably would grasp this fairly well, since it's basically just straight arithmetic. Aside from that, though, the way calculations work with modulus operations, to give an example, let's say you dealt damage, and the damage dealt, as some of you have seen with the actual damage log for the input, it isn't simply 2 or 5. They're not whole numbers. They're actually, I guess you could say they're fractional. So you have, maybe 12.13491. You're going to have, I believe it's up to 5 decimal values for damage inflicted either to you or to your enemies, technically. And you would think, I think as Verge actually figured out in one of his recent videos, I forget which one exactly, might have been Impact. But they had, oh no, it's probably testing blast arrows, I think, and fivefold. Either way, they had noticed in the game's actual internal, I guess I'm going to call it damage log, but it's under the history tab. Wait. There we go. Oh, my tabs at the top of this aren't showing up. That's weird. Oh well. If you tab over to the far right in your history tab, you can actually start finding some player data. Yeah, total damage dealt foes. This is a fairly accurate readout, and it is recording apparently everything that you actually do dish out to your enemies, but it's not rounding, as far as I can tell. It might. but these are obviously whole numbers. Just so I've dealt apparently a total of 4 million plus damage to enemies, which sadly is all rabbits almost on this character. Um, the There are going to be decimal values in here, and I believe, as Verge noticed in his video with aid from the input's damage log, even when you're dealing just 0.5 damage, which technically reads as 0 damage inflicted to your enemy, um, multiple of those together eventually does add up to a single value added to your total damage dealt. That is a bit interesting. However, I think because Gemma Lady was the one who explained this to me, since I hadn't seen the video, or maybe I hadn't noticed this part of it. She had mentioned that in the video, Verge had noticed the amount of times you need to inflict, let's say 0.5. It may start out as a low amount, so maybe 0.5 twice will give you a value of 1, but eventually over time you need more instances of 0.5 before it racks up again to another additional value point. That is a sign of Modulus Operation. Modulus Operation is not simply rounding up your decimal values to the next one. So 0.5 plus 0.5 is not what's happening. Instead, it is working off of, God, what would you call this? Fractions, basically. Fractionals and remainders is basically what you get with modular operations. Wow, my brain's frying on me right now just thinking on this. So modular operations is going to basically give you remainders, and it's used a lot of the time in trying to simplify numbers down to something that's more tangible and readable and usable. It can be an easier way of handling some aspects of code, but there are better ways of doing it. Knowing that Dragon's Dogma was not handled by an A team at Capcom, there were probably a handful of junior programmers working on this game. Given my friend's experience and how he explained it to me, if you have a junior programmer on a team, or a team made up of mostly junior programmers, not saying that's what we have here with this, but it could be, they won't know those advanced techniques, and whatever they know that can work as a bit of a shortcut, so long as the game is still working and it is handling the code correctly, it will actually be leaned on heavily. As far as I can tell, Modulus Operation has probably been fitted into almost every aspect of this game. The more you start looking at and thinking critically on how the game is handling things such as stagger buildup, probably not knockdown buildup, since that works a little bit differently, but potentially. But also, damage dealt, damage received. Stat boosts are probably being handled with a modular operation. And as we have discovered, your equipment weight, as well as encumbrance, is going to be a modular operation. We wouldn't necessarily have thought so, just straight up looking at where's my weapons? Just straight up looking at how much encumbrance you have. But there is something he did point out when using modular operations. If you have the larger and larger a number gets, the less likely you are to get a rounding down. So essentially, as you start seeing with Devil's Bane, as I'll show here, I throw 1 onto my character. And because of the overall encumbrance that she currently has, it is being rounded down. Now, if I add in another, it's going to do it correctly and keep it at 2 instead of 1.99. And then we're going to get another 2. And then we're going to get rounded down again. So we're going to get another instance of 1.99. Now, that was basically on the third one when it decided it needed to round down again. We have so far gifted her 4 of these. If this was just a pattern, then it would repeat. But because it's a modular operation, I now need to give her more before it's going to round down again. So here's one, here's two. Now here's the third. There's another one there. Here's another one. Here's another one. And here's the third one again. So now we're on the third gifted Devil's Bane, or essentially 2 kilogram item. As you saw there, about 2 or 3 times in a row, by the third one given out, it rounded down. This time now, her overall weight will be so high that it's not rounding down again with the third one given. Let's give her all those, and let's give her another one. It's still, now we're basically at the fourth one, and it's not, rounding it down. I want to see now what it's actually going to take now before it's going to round down again. Right, so we got 5 of these. Let's see here. There we go. So it's, what was that, the 5th one now for it to round down eventually. So you kind of got I think I might have gotten my point across with this. You're going to have essentially diminishing returns on how the how modular operations are going to affect calculations on whatever it's being applied to. In this case, weight, but also certainly all the other facets of this game that it is handling numeric values for. Another aspect, an indicator that this, at least weight, is being handled by a modular operation. If you open up your D-input tool, if you're using it, or if you want to look at your actual save file, since this is reading straight off of the save file, we can see that the actual weight for the Dragon's Dogma at 3 stars is not 2.0, it's 2.35, plus, several other zeros on top of it. That right there is another indication that the actual raw value for weight is being plugged into, most likely, a modular operation, which then pumps out a 2.0 value that the game is supposed to read for, which then gets plugged into another calculation that handles your encumbrance. And if all of this is not floating point, sorry, if all of this is modular, then it's going to be subject to the same type of occasional, I guess I'm just going to call it a rounding error, even though it's not even an error. It's just an actual literal readout based off of the remainder that is derived from a modular operation that is calculating based off of this value, based off of this value, based off of this value. This can start getting compounded a lot, as you can probably tell at this point. Modular operations themselves are not necessarily bad coding or flawed to the point where it is irredeemable. I would say it is still good coding, and it is very necessary in certain aspects, especially if you're trying to derive, or not derive, but whittle down a very large number, so that you can basically get a true or false statement, practically. That is a decent example of when you might want to be using this. The larger the values that it needs to work with, the smaller, I believe it is, that the remainders will most likely be, and therefore you're probably going to start getting things like rounding down. Yeah, this is all just very strange. When it comes to actually seeing the actual bugs, though, in the game, or actual, I guess, errors, as things are depicted on here, like Devil's Bane and Dragon's Dogma on the equip page, when it says they are 1 kilogram each, now that is an error. That is not the result of a modulus calculation. This is just someone not handling the UI correctly. So I don't know exactly where that's getting pulled from. Maybe they decided they were going to use a calculation in here, but if this was working off of a modular operation, it would be discernible with a bunch of other weapons, which it's not. However, there are some other fun things that have been pointed out. I forget the guy's name. It starts with a Z. But someone over on the wiki actually pointed out another weapon that has a strange readout on the equip page, and that is the Rusted Archstaff at Gold Dragonforge. That, as you can see, reads as simply weighing absolutely nothing, which it certainly does weigh something. I'll just show it quick in the quick here on the page. You can see it actually weighs 1, and it's supposed to weigh 1, and it definitely, changes my weight by 1. It is subject to the same modular operation that you have with the Devil's Bane and Dragon's Dogma. If I reduce my weight, let me take some of these off, get them back. You'll see it does the exact same thing. Oh, good, she's over encumbered. Whatever. Yeah, so it's only increasing my weight by 0.99 right now. But if I give her a second one, it'll go up by a whole number of 1. So the modular operation at work again. I'm glad my character's at its weight of 4.44 because apparently that is just one of those thresholds for when the modular operation is going to reduce the actual weight value by a fraction when giving it to your character. Really is a strange thing to find, but also really neat. Anyone who is watching us, if you are familiar with modular operations, floating point operations, because there are some floating point operations in this game as well. Please don't ask me to explain it. I'm rusty as hell on any of this. But if anyone sees this and is starting to understand what I'm talking about, and you are familiar with arithmetic, the wiki would probably benefit a bit from having you guys take another look at any of the formulas derived for things like damage infliction and stagger and knockdown infliction, because those all behave strange and weirdly. Good example, when Verge was Vergorio specifically, I call him Verge for short. When Vergorio was taking a look at stagger knockdown by testing impact, it seemed like it was working off of a factor of, I think, 30%, for at least the augment itself impact. It seemed like it was increasing, your knockdown values by a factor of 30%. When you can look at the actual the augment data itself in the XML file and see that no, it's supposed to be 15%. My guess is that 15% is being fed through a modular operation, which is then turning it into something else, providing you with maybe a 30% or whatever else the code might be working with. So anyone that sees this and is good with arithmetic and working out things like this, maybe take a look in the wiki on some of those pages for this type of stuff. Reach out in comment section, or if you're on Discord, head over to Dragon's Dogma Central. Someone might be there that you can talk to if you're looking to get a little bit more knowledge in the game and work some mathematics stuff. That's really about all I've got to talk about with this. It wasn't really, I guess you'd say, imperative to understanding the game, but does help clarify stuff that is newly discovered, so it's not listed as a bug when it definitely seemed like one at first. But otherwise, I hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. See you later.